Okay, and welcome to Internation. I share with you a little video to see where we are.
What will they say about you? That you shouldn't have left? That it will be hard? That you'll miss home? That it's too risky? That you'll never adjust? But we say you're a pioneer. You'll figure out the answers or find someone who can help. You'll learn the language. You'll lend the pitch. You'll start the company. You'll find the job. You'll adjust, you'll succeed, and you'll thrive. Your life abroad will never be the same as the one you left behind, and you'll never be the same either. You'll discover abilities you didn't know you had, and new friends you don't know how you lived without. You live in places you never imagined, and have experiences you only dreamed about, and overcome challenges you never thought you'd face. And we'll be there, every step of the way.
What do you think that is land of meat?
Exactly. If anybody knows anything about Romania, it would be great to hear. Or if anybody maybe traveled.
Hello. Yes, this is Claudia. Because of Dracula.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because of Dracula. I have been to Romania a couple of times and have visited Dracula's castle. So that's the myth. Yes.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
This is wherever you go. And every time I travel to foreign countries, people look at me, and especially when I tell them that I'm from Transylvania, because that's where Dracula was born. They ask me, so are you a vampire? And my answer is yes. The first thing I do when I wake up for breakfast, I have a glass of blood. So it's quite funny. As you know, Romania has been associated with these bloodthirsty vampires, witches and wizards for many years. And thanks to Bram Stoker, who came up with Dracula, with this fictional character, actually. I will explain a little bit later what's with Dracula. Romania's lands became very famous for dark crafts, for fictional creatures. Of course, many of these stories are only the result of imagination, but still Romania is a place of symbolism and very rich traditions and legends. You will see some of them a little bit later. Good. So if you haven't been to Romania, you will want to know that it is the 12th largest country in Europe. So it's not a small country at all. And if you look a little bit at its neighbors, it's located in Southeast Europe, and it is surrounded by several neighbors such as Hungary, Serbia, Bulgaria, Moldova, which used to be a part of Romania, Ukraine to the north, and also the Black Sea. So we are very fortunate to have lots of seaside resorts with beautiful sandy beaches. So it's highly recommended to go there. If we want to know a little bit more about Romania, then a few things that should be known that are important are that its total area is around 238 square kilometers. It has a population of about, currently, I think 19 million, 19 to 20 million. It used to be somewhere around 23 million. There are also lots of Romanians living abroad. Most of the Romanians living abroad live in countries like Italy, Spain, France, Great Britain, but also the United States and Canada. The capital city is Bucharest. It has a temperate climate, and we have 4 distinct seasons, but lately with the global warming, things are changing worldwide, so it's not as it was before. Some of the the biggest and most numerous ethnic groups, so other than the Romanian population, we have Hungarians, we have Germans, we have the Roma population, as they are called, gypsies, and of course, different other minorities, but these are the most important ones. It's important to mention here that Hungarians, being the second population of Romania after Romanians, the Hungarian language is also spoken in Romania, particularly in Transylvania, because Transylvania used to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So if you come to my hometown of Cluj, you will hear lots of Hungarian spoken on the streets. When it comes to religion, it's important to know that Romanians are Christian, they are Orthodox. So approximately 82% of the population is Christian Orthodox. Also Catholic, the Catholic religion is predominant after the Orthodox one. It accounts the Roman and the Greek Catholic, Roman being the predominant one. Both of them account for approximately 7% of the population, and also Protestant. Interesting to note is that there's also a small Muslim minority in the south, approximately somewhere around 40,000 people, according to the latest studies. Most of them of Turkish ethnicity, and there used to be lots of Jewish people in Romania, but most of them left, and currently the Jewish population is very small, only around 3,000 people left. The political system in Romania, as you probably know, after Dracula, I think the most famous character, not a very fortunate one, is the communist dictator. We'll speak about him a little bit later. So currently Romania is a semi-presidential republic. This meaning that the prime minister is the head of the government, whereas the president represents the country internationally. He signs decrees and approves laws that are passed by the parliament. And because those less known details add flavor to any traveler's experience of a foreign land, and probably you might be thinking of traveling to Romania a little bit later, I would like you to imagine now the world without Romania, and to think if you consider you would lose anything. And I invite you to watch a video entitled "The World Without Romania," which presents the so-called curiosities, the less known facts about the country. Watch a short video.
There are some countries without which the world would have a completely different face than the one we know today. I mean, we can all imagine how the world would be without the USA, Great Britain, or Italy. A world without hamburgers, corporations, the UN, tea-based rituals, big clocks named Ben, pizza, pasta, romantic songs, and why not, picturesque mob movies. The list could go on forever, but we have just one question. How many of you have tried to think of a world without Romania? For those of you who haven't, take a good look onward. To begin with, try to imagine writing your entire life with only a pencil. Not so convenient, is it? In case you didn't know, and we're sure you didn't, the fountain pen was invented by a Romanian professor named Petrache Poinaru. His invention was patented by the French government in May 1827. Dr. Stefan Odobleja, another illustrious Romanian scientist, is renowned as the father of cybernetics. Practically, he's the inventor of modern cybernetics, and the first to state that cybernetics originates in psychology. Nicolae Paulescu, a Romanian physiologist, invented insulin, a very controversial invention initially and very much disregarded. Only 50 years later, after two Canadians received a Nobel for the same invention, was Nicolae Paulescu's precedence finally recognized, and he was rightfully acknowledged as the true inventor of insulin. As in the 20th century, time was the key word for solving anything. The jet plane, invented by Henry Coanda, was one of the most revolutionary inventions ever. Without him, the jet plane would probably have been invented much later. Without a Romanian gymnast, the computers wouldn't have had the possibility to learn to display a perfect 10. Nadia Comaneci got the first 10 in the history of gymnastics in Montreal, 1976. Imagine Bram Stoker trying to find a count in order to write his bestseller, and Hollywood craving for a vampire to put him on the big screen. So they would all have to thank Vlad Tepes, the Romanian medieval ruler who had the bad luck of becoming the bloodthirsty demon of modern times. Probably a long time would have passed until someone may have thought of writing a complete history of religions. Mircea Eliade was the first in the world to do it. All around the world, nobody would have thought of mocking a serious matter like death. Natively creative, the Romanians have their own way of dealing with it by laughing in its face. We are the first nation to have a happy graveyard, renowned for its storytelling funeral plates. Unless UEFA had approved a 1-meter-wide goal, nobody would have been able to defend 4 penalty strikes in a row. This performance by Romanian goalkeeper Helmut Ducadam granted Steaua Bucharest the Champions Cup in 1986. Hey, Mr. Bill Gates, we want to congratulate you for being the richest man in the world. But let's put it this way, you owe us big time. The second spoken language in your company is Romanian. Repeat after me, mulțumesc. Thank you, that is. But let's move on to other gates, more pleasant ones this time. The gates in Maramureș are unique in the world for their architecture, so take a glimpse. If we're good at one thing, it's having a good time. Gastronomically speaking, we are the proud owners of the most mouth-pleasing dishes in the world. And if you try these, we kindly recommend you to feast your senses on our world-renowned wines with a history of centuries. The history of art would have been many pages thinner without the contribution of such a great sculptor as Brancusi. Brancusi did much to encourage a revival of carving and great respect for an artist's materials. Brancusi's sculptures are rightly now considered to be the work of a modern master. Another great Romanian contribution to architecture is the Brâncovenesque style, a unique style renowned worldwide. Americans have one thing to thank us for, their national sport. Because while other people were chasing wild goats in order to constitute a national sport, Romanians invented the godfather of baseball, a sort of baseball that is, called the Uina, which was first attested to in 1364. Last but not least, we have to admit that all the great minds behind all these achievements owe a great deal to the one thing that binds us all. That very special thing that relishes us, that makes us get new friends, that comes with us to football matches, that likes to stay with us at family reunions, that likes Christmas, Labor Day, and all our thirsty mates, and that brought us here today, excellent beer.
We do have excellent beer and excellent wine, so alcohol is not missing, definitely, if you happen to be around here. Now, because when you travel to another country, it can be funny to speak just a little bit of the language to manage at least some of the words. I thought it might be fun to practice some of these and to see if any of you can guess the meaning of these words and phrases that I included here, some of the basic ones. The first one being salut. I think that's quite easy. Hello, exactly. Ce faci, and this is especially going to be easier for people coming from Spain, Italy, France, or Portugal.
What are you doing?
Exactly. Ce faci, how are you? What are you doing? Exactly. Bună dimineața. This is a little bit more difficult. Yes, it means good morning. Bună seara is good evening.
Good evening.
Like in Italian, we say buonasera. So bună seara. See, it's very similar. Sărut mâna. This is a very interesting salute which carries the cultural meaning. Why? Because it is used in two ways.
Salut mâna.
Sărut mâna, in literal translation, word by word, means I kiss your hand. And actually, those people who use this greeting are children.
Salut mâna.
Sărut mâna, exactly. Yes, it's used by children when they talk to adults. So it's a sign of respect for somebody who is older than you. But
they use it in Hungary too.
They use it in Hungary too?
Yeah.
How do you say it?
Kezi choker.
Kezi chokolom, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
you're right.
I kiss your hand. Yes, yes.
Exactly. And you also say kezi chokolom in the same way men say this to women, right?
I don't speak Hungarian. I just know that word.
Oh, okay. I thought you
As
know
a respect,
Hungarian.
my father was Hungarian, and so as a respect, I knew that word, kezi chokolom.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's also used when a man
Harry.
is a woman because he wants to show respect towards that woman. So Romanian society is becoming more and more modern, but it still preserves certain courtesy, unwritten rules, like a man who is like a true gentleman would say sărut mâna to a woman. Îmi pare bine. This means nice to meet you. Bine means good.
Îmi pare bine.
Îmi pare bine. Exactly.
Îmi pare bine.
Mhm.
Îmi pare bine.
Exactly.
Îmi pare bine.
Perfect. Yeah. Well done. The next one is when you want to say goodbye. This is la revedere. You know, arrivederci. It's again a little bit similar. La revedere. Mulțumesc, which you heard before, and noroc, which is cheers.
Noroc.
So when you say noroc, cheers, when you drink the Romanian beer. So what do you think about the Romanian language? What group of languages do you think it belongs to? Now that you've heard
Latin.
Latin and then Slavic roots as well.
Exactly. Yes, I remember very well. Some years ago, I was teaching Romanian in the United States, and my American students, they didn't know anything about Romania, so they were very taken by surprise. It's very different from the Germanic languages, definitely, but also lots of people who were meeting me there and hearing that I'm Romanian and I speak Romanian, they were saying, "Oh, that's some sort of Russian, isn't it?" No, it's not. It's not at all. It does have, as you said, Slavic influences, but it's not Slavic language. Some information about the language, actually. It's the official language in Romania and Moldova as well. As I was saying, Moldova was part of Romania. It gained independence in 1992. It was also part of the Russian Empire. It is a Romance language, so it's the closest to Latin, actually. It belongs to the same family of languages like Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French. But Romanian is the only language that is spoken in Eastern Europe, unlike the other Latin languages that are spoken in Western Europe. And some of its influences are Slavic, as you rightly said, lots of words borrowed from French, from German even, from Greek and from Turkish, because as I said a little bit earlier, there's quite a big population of Turkish ethnicity in the southern part of Romania, particularly. So we can continue now. It's a phonetic language. So if you read Romanian, you will read it as you will hear what you will read, basically. It's not like English, where one thing is written down and sometimes you pronounce it differently. And you already saw those funny letters there, and I'm going to pronounce them. The first one is A. The next one is U. The next one is also U. So both of these are U, Sh, and Ц. So you will not find these letters in other languages. Good. Now that you know about the language and you found out a few things about less known things about Romania, also about some of the people who are, let's say, the image of Romania. Think, who is Romania? So when I asked you at the very beginning, you told me it's a land of myth because of Dracula. And I think this is what comes to any foreigner's mind. What is Romania? Who is Romania? It's Dracula. The second, Dracula, by the way, this is what is interesting to know, was not, it's a fictitious character, and Bram Stoker inspired himself after a historical character who was real in Romania's history, who lived in the 1400s. He was a ruler of Țara Românească, a Romanian province in the south. And he was called Vlad Dracul. Drac in Romanian means devil. So Vlad the devil, or Vlad Țepeș, because he was very, very cruel. What did he do? He was cruel with a good purpose, actually. That's the funny thing. He was impaling everybody that committed a crime, people who lied, who stole, who did all sorts of bad things. He impaled them. So he would not forgive anybody for any bad thing that those people would do. Sadly, his cruel treatment turned against himself, and he was killed. He was assassinated in 1476, so he didn't have a happy end. The second character that Romania is identified with very often is Nicolae Ceausescu, who was the famous another cruel character, communist dictator. As you probably know, Romania was a communist country until 1989, when communism fell in Romania and Romania became a democratic country. And the dictator Ceausescu ruled the country between 1967 until 1989, when a revolution broke out in Romania, and he, together with his wife, was shot. So they were both executed. Again, a very unhappy end. Nadia Comăneci, you just learned about her, if you didn't know about her. So she's the famous gymnast that at the age of 14 only, she was very, very young, was the first gymnast to have a perfect 10 at the Olympic Games. So she's quite a famous character as well. Also ranked world #1 in 1973-74 is tennis player Ilie Năstase. He was also one of the 10 tennis players in history who won more than 100 ATP professional titles. And because we are into sports now, Gheorghe Hagi, he's a famous footballer, and he was considered during his time in the 80s and 90s the greatest Romanian footballer of all times. He's still considered, but at that time he was considered one of the best football players in the whole world. So these are probably the most famous people that would come to mind to somebody who's not very much into culture and arts. But because I am, other than my academic profile, I'm a cultural entrepreneur as well, and I'm very passionate about culture and arts, I thought it would be very interesting to share some of the faces of Romania in culture and arts. So let's start with literature. And we have a few famous authors, and I'm going to briefly refer to each of them. Maybe some of these names sound familiar to you. I'm actually curious if you heard of any of those. Has anybody heard of any of these authors? Yes?
Ionesco.
Ionesco.
Famous.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Two of them.
Wiesel is
Elie
the
Wiesel.
Holocaust
Elie Wiesel.
writer.
Exactly, yes. So I'll start with the first one, Eugen Ionescu. This is the pronunciation in Romanian, but because he lived in France and he was considered to be a French playwright, actually, his name was Scott. Yes, he was a playwright, and he was one of the most important representatives of the theater of the absurd, like Samuel Beckett and others. Mircea Eliade, he lived in many countries. He was also a diplomat. And he, during the last part of his life, he lived in the United States, and he was the first ever to write a history of religions. So he's very famous for that. Tristan Tzara, he's one of the founders of the Dada movement, the famous Dada movement. He was a Romanian French, again, lived in France, avant-garde poet, essayist, but also a performance artist. Elie Wiesel, you heard about him. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986 because he was a Holocaust survivor. He's Jewish. And he moved to the United States, so he's a Romanian-American writer and activist. Herta Müller, she's very famous. She's the only Romanian who ever won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2009. She was born in Transylvania, near Timișoara, the city of Timișoara. She's of German ethnicity, and because she was very persecuted by the communist regime, she fled to Germany, and this is where she lives today. Paul Celan, or Celan, as he is called, he was a German language poet and translator, again Jewish, born in Romania. Ana Blandiana, who you actually see in this photo here, she's in the lower left corner. She's a very, very famous author today in Romania. She joined me, you see her with me here with her translator, who is above her in the image, and with British poet Fiona Sampson. I organized the Romanian British Literature Festival last year, and I had her as a special guest. She's, if you imagine her, you can think about Anna Akhmatova in Russian culture. So she's really a legendary figure. She's not only a very, very famous poet, but she's also an activist. And she was, in 1989, when communism fell, one of the people who fought against the communist regimes, and she appeared on the Romanian television. She was protesting, and then she is, after the revolution, together with her husband, who is no longer alive, sadly, they opened the former prison, communist prison in Maramureș in Sighet. They turned it into the so-called memorial for the victims of communism. So it's a museum at present, and they are the ones that founded the museum. And the last name there, Mircea Cărtărescu, he's probably the most famous fiction writer at present. And he was also a candidate for the Nobel Prize. He didn't get it, but he's quite famous. Because you also found out about a famous Romanian artist, a sculptor. Can anybody tell me, does anybody know this artwork? No, it's called The Kiss. And it is a sculpture made by Constantin Brâncuș, or as many people call him, Brancusi. Maybe you heard his name being pronounced like this. Constantin Brâncuș is Romania's most famous artist ever. He was a sculptor. He lived in France. He lived in the United States. The famous collector Peggy Guggenheim was really crazy about his works and wanted to collect as many of them as possible. And he's very famous for lots of works, but maybe you heard about the infinite column, which you saw in that video, the column that he built representing the infinite, which you can see in the southern part of Romania in a city called Craiova. And yes, so he's really famous, and his works are absolutely extraordinary. Saul Steinberg, Romanian American because he lived in America. He was well known for his New Yorker cartoons, and he was called the Leonardo of graphic drollery. He's one artist who is really full of wit, and you'll see one of his works in a minute. Paul Neagu, a Romanian-British artist. He worked in diverse media, drawing, sculpture, performance art, watercolor, and he's regarded as one of the most important, most representative artists of Romanian art in 1960s and 70s. Nicolae Grigorescu, I wanted to include here a few names that would represent different sides of art. Grigorescu, you will see one of his works was very much depicting rural Romania. You will see very many rural scenes, portraits of peasants in Romania. He lived in between 1838 and 1907. So he was one of the founders of modern Romanian painting. He's an important name to remember. Geta Brătescu, who died very recently, 3 years ago. She was one of the first representatives of conceptualist art in Romania and quite famous worldwide. The following two, Ștefan Cârția and Sorin Ilfoveanu, are two artists that are among my personal favorites. They are born around the 1940s, and their paintings have a very rich symbolism, and they are almost reaching mysticism. You will see two of their works. And Adrian Ghenie, who is the youngest in this list, still alive, he's somewhere around, he's in his 40s. I think he lives in Germany now, and he is one of the best sold artists at Sotheby's, Christie's, all these auction houses. His paintings sell for millions, and he's very famous for defaced figures and different other works. In the next two slides, I included a few works just for you to see, works by these artists that I mentioned. So the first one here, I think you already guessed, it's Nicolae Grigorescu. Paul Neagu, the Romanian British artist, is the image on the right, and lower down here is Ștefan Cârția, one of the two favorites of mine that I mentioned. See the symbolism in the painting. And the next slide, we have Adrian Ghenie in the top left corner, the younger painter who sells at Sotheby's and Christie's. In the right hand corner up, we have Steinberg, who illustrated for the New Yorker. In the lower down, we have Ilfoveanu, and also then we have Geta Brătescu, who I mentioned, she passed away 3 years ago. Okay, so we can continue with music. Does anybody know who this lovely lady in the photo is? She's very, very famous around the world. Her name is Angela Gheorghiu, the second in my list here, and she's a very famous soprano. She sang with Maria Callas, and she sings at present in the most famous. Sorry? Okay, I thought you wanted to ask something. She sings in some of the most famous opera houses, so she's quite famous. George Enescu, the first one in the list, he is the most famous composer and also a very adept and absolutely amazing violinist. again, well-known worldwide. I recommend you to listen to the Romanian Rhapsody. We wouldn't have enough time today to listen to it. It's a little bit long, but it's definitely worth listening to. He composed, he has lots of other compositions, but the Romanian Rhapsody 1 and 2 are really, really great. He was very much influenced by folklore. Maria Tănase, she was again a famous folk singer, but she sang music ranging from traditional Romanian music to tango, operetta, and so on. She was considered to be Romania's Edith Piaf. I'm sure you all know Edith Piaf, so something similar. Radu Lupu, for those who probably heard of him, he's still alive. He's a very famous pianist, and at present he's regarded as one of the best pianists worldwide. He's absolutely amazing. If you get to listen to him performing live, it's not sure that you would not cry while doing that. Gheorghe Zamfir, the master of the pan flute, maybe you heard of him too. He channeled Eastern European folk music into commercial success and collaborated with many international artists, including Ennio Morricone, the film music composer. Maria Raducanu, who's a very famous jazz singer. Loredana is Romania's Madonna. She's a very famous pop singer, also called the Queen of Pop. Very controversial character at present, I would say. She's in somewhere around her 50s now. And because we were talking about the ethnic minorities in Romania, Taraf de Haiducs is a Roma, a gypsy band. They are actually a multi-generational collective. You will see members ranging between the ages of 20 and maybe even 80. They are all absolutely extraordinary. They exhibit a staggering degree of virtuosity, and they are well known worldwide. They were named Taraf de Haiducs by the French, actually, and they performed a lot in France. Maybe those of you living in France have heard of them. Because from what I was saying here, you noticed George Enescu, Maria Tănase, Gheorghe Zamfir, Maria Raducanu. Most of these artists are heavily influenced by folk music, by the traditional Romanian music. So on the next slide, you will find out about another famous artist. Here in the image, it's me with him a few years ago. I was very happy to meet him, actually, and I included this image also to show you his outfit. He always wears these traditional hats and these traditional clothes. He's considered to be Romania's most beloved bard, and he resurrected the old Romanian songs. He used to say, what is singing? Singing is a necessity. If a man doesn't sing, he dies. It is a grace, it is a transcendental custom, it is a chance from God. He's singing these old Romanian songs. You will probably find similarities. He also had a project in which he was trying to bring music from the Orient, from Persia and other countries and find similarities. So I included a short video with him just to see the type of songs that he's singing. So it's very, very rich, very spiritual. And before you listen to it, the song is called The Sky and the Stars. And I'll just briefly tell you the idea. He starts by saying the sky and the stars change their signs, their symbols constantly, just like my lover is constantly changing her beads. So let's take a few minutes to listen to him before we move on.
Da cerul și cu stelele, dai da tot își schimbă semnele, dai ca mândra mărgelele. Da luniță dragă, luniță dai fă-mi și mie luminiță dai, da să mă lame mândruță. Și dacă ai trece puntița, dai, și dacă ai trece puntița, dai, dar nu dar nu-mi trebuie vederea ta, da, nu-mi trebuie vederea ta. Ai, da cerul și cu stelele, dai, da cerul și cu stelele, da, da tătâși, da tătâși, da tătâși schimbă semnile, da, da ca mândra mărgelele, dai, dai, da lumuță și dai nu.
You could definitely see how very much into it he is, absolutely absorbed in a different dimension, in a different world. And as I saw somebody wrote in the chat, I'm not going to dwell too much on film, but thinking that many of you might be into watching films from different countries, Romania is famous very much for the new wave, as it was called. And I just included the titles of a few very famous, some of the most famous Romanian films. I'm just going to highlight two of them. The second one in the list, called 4 months, 3 weeks and 2 days. You see one of the main actors in this film in this photo here. She lives in London, Ana Maria Marinca. This is a film directed by Cristian Mungiu that got the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in 2007. And the last one, Collective, it's actually a documentary. It got the Best Documentary Award at the 2020 European Film Awards. And this year it was nominated for 2 Oscars, for Best Documentary and also for the Best Foreign Feature Film. It did not get any of the Oscars, but it was the first Romanian film ever to be nominated for an Oscar. So it's an achievement in itself. But all these films are worth watching if you would be interested, and they're all award winners, either at the Cannes Festival or at the Berlin Film Festival in different years, ranging between 2006, that's when the Romanian New Wave, around 2005, 2006 started, and that's when, since then, most of these very famous films, Romanian films, were created. So we can continue with traditions, because I was telling you at the beginning that yes, Romania is a land of myth because of Dracula, but also because it is very rich in traditions. And I'm not going to refer in very much detail to these because we don't have enough time, but just to quickly point out, the first one called Marțișor, which is actually a name coming from March, which is Martie in Romanian. It's celebrated on the 1st of March and it represents the revival of nature. So like the beginning of spring. A funny story and an interesting legend is that Baba Dokia, she was an old lady and she was the mother of the god of love in Romanian folklore, Dragobete. And she was very unhappy because her son married a girl that she didn't want him to marry. So because of this, she used to give her all sorts of tasks that she knew and she was sure he will never be able to accomplish. So one day, because she was always supported by God in her suffering and pain, this girl, one day, because she sent her to pick berries, and it was not yet the season for the berries, but the girl did come back with the berries. Baba Dokia was so surprised and she said, okay, spring came back, so I'm going to take my sheep to the hills. And she took 7 fur coats on her, or 8, something like that. And because they were very heavy and she had to walk and she had to climb up the mountain, she had to ditch 1 coat at a time. So every day between, nowadays, it is said that if you choose a day between the 1st of March and the 8th of March, that is your Baba, like your old hag. It means that if that day is sunny, the whole year for you is going to be a good one. If that day is rainy, then the whole year is going to be a very bad one. Sânzienele, another interesting celebration on the 24th of June, also coinciding with the International Day of the Romanian Blouse. It's a holiday celebrating love and fertility. And Sânzienele are actually fairies, beautiful girls meeting and dancing in the fields, protecting the crops and bringing good health and only good things. There are lots of Christmas and New Year celebrations and traditions as well. People go singing carols, they wear bear furs or different costumes. For instance, the head of a goat, and they wear all these masks. So there are all sorts of rituals. Also, it's very rich in traditional food, and we have the ancient custom of slaughtering the pig on Christmas Day, which is not very nice, definitely. Another legend, which is very famous, is that of Meșterul Manole. Meșter means master, Manole. Very briefly, to tell you, it's the story of a prince that wanted to build the most beautiful monastery ever, and he hired Master Manole with a few other people to build this monastery. But after they started building, the walls of the monastery kept crumbling. They kept coming down and they didn't know what to do. So the prince threatened that he's going to kill them. They were very stressed because of this. And one night, Manole dreamt that if they are going to build inside those walls, somebody he or his people, his men he was working with, loved very much, then the building will be able to be erected. And so the next day he woke up and he told his men, look what my dream was. And they all agreed that the first wife who was going to come and visit them to bring them food the next day was going to be sacrificed and built between the monastery's walls. Sadly, after they woke up, Manole saw his wife coming, who was pregnant, and he begged God to start a storm, to do something to make her go back home and not come there, but nothing could stop her. So she was sacrificed, and after the monastery was erected, it was the most beautiful monastery ever. It's called Curtea de Argeș. What the prince did, he wanted to make sure that nobody would ever be able to build such a beautiful monastery, and he locked all of these craftsmen, masons, on the roof of the monastery, so they had to become Icarus, each of them in turn, and die one by one. So quite a tragic end. I'm not going to talk about Miorița too much, just that it's the story of 3 shepherds coming from different parts of Romania, and because the Moldavian one is the richest, he's envied by his colleagues, by the other shepherds who plan to kill him. And one of his sheep, who becomes a talking sheep, overhears their conversation and tries to warn her shepherd that his colleagues will kill him. They're planning to do this. And the story wants to highlight the strong connection that Romanians have with nature, with their origins. So his reaction is very natural. He says, I'm not afraid to die, just don't tell anybody that I died. Tell them that I married the moon, and that my priests were the mountains, and so on and so forth. So Romanian people are very, very, very close to nature. And the last one in my list, which is quite spectacular, and I prepared a short video. It's not a very good quality video because it's an archival material, but a very good one in content. Just wanted to show you, so Miorița, the traditional food, Mărțișor is the one celebrated on the 1st of March. So you have this red and white thread that is pinned to the chest and that usually men give to women. This is the monastery in the image here, where Manole basically sacrificed his wife. On the next slide, you will be able to see a few more. Yes, so here, up here in the upper left corner, and also both images in the lower side of the slide, these are all carolers. So people going to sing carols for Christmas, either dressed up with different costumes like bear fur and skin, or the goat, which you can see here in the image, or carolers wearing traditional clothes. And the fairies, the midsummer fairies, the beautiful girls, which I mentioned, the Sânziene, is this image on the right-hand corner. The next slide is going to be that short video relating to the Belușari. This is considered to be one of the fastest, if not the fastest, folk dance in the world. You'll see that it's not a joke at all. So let's watch it. It's not long at all. that fast any longer. So you can definitely find recordings if you go on YouTube, which are more recent, but they are somehow not as spectacular as these guys are here. When we talk about tradition, there is one thing in which it is reflected in very much in Romania, that is art and crafts. There are people sculpting, there are people weaving, and if we look a little bit at fashion, you can go on to the next slide. I don't know if anybody heard about the Romanian blouse and how famous it is. Romania used to be a monarchy for some years, and it had a British-born queen, Queen Marie, who was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She was really, really passionate about these traditional clothes, and she was wearing them. You'll see a photo of her in a little bit. So she was very inspired. Also, international fashion designers are inspired by the Romanian blouse, like Yves Saint Laurent, very many celebrities around the globe. It has very rich symbolism, vivid colors, intricate adornments. It's called Ie, that is its name, and it has a language. So the symbolism, if you decipher, in old times, women used to stitch them, and every stitching actually was a symbol. It signified something, and it's very interesting to decipher them. So if we move on to the next slide, you will see some examples. They're absolutely spectacular. These are two public figures in Romania at present who are very much promoting the Romanian blouse and the traditional clothing. And the next one. On the left-hand side, you see Queen Marie wearing the traditional garments. And on the right-hand side, you see all these celebrities from Halle Berry to Nicole Kidman wearing, again, these blouses, which are absolutely beautiful. I know that there are some other countries in Eastern Europe having similar garments. So maybe some of you who are here, you can share your thoughts later. So we can continue now with tourism. So I like to show you some of the places, if you will be interested to visit Romania, some of the most important places that would be worth visiting. In the image here, you will see Prince Charles. Prince Charles's property in Transylvania. For those of you that don't know, the Prince of Wales is probably one of the strongest ambassadors that Romania could ever have. He jokes about it, and he says that he has a stake in the country because of the predecessors and our connections with the British royal family and our British-born queen. So he is a very devoted fan, to say so. He has two properties in Transylvania, and they can be rented out to tourists. So if you want to go to his guest houses, you can book a room there and spend some time. It's beautiful to go there in the summer, in September as well. But of course, I will answer questions at the end, so you might also want to ask me when it's best to travel. This is something that he said in one of his interviews. To find such huge health of natural and cultural diversity under a single flag is quite remarkable. And it's one of the features that make Romania such a unique and special corner of Europe. Well, why are we that lucky? We are lucky because we have beaches, so we have the Black Sea, we have mountains, the Carpathians basically make up the Carpathian chain, goes through several countries, but half of this chain is in Romania. We have the Danube Delta. The Danube flows through Romania, so we have the Danube Delta, which is absolutely spectacular, and you'll find out about it. And just short touristic video to show you why it is worth visiting Romania, I chose Prince Charles to tell you why it's worth to visit Romania. So let's watch it.
Over the years since my first visit, more than 20 years ago, I have come to know and to love so much about Romania. Her unique historic heritage and unrivaled biodiversity, her vast mixed forests and breathtaking natural landscapes. As much as I have seen, there is so much more that I long to explore. Romania is an astonishingly diverse country. From the Danube Delta, Europe's largest and most pristine wetland, to the forests, springs and monasteries of Bukovina, Moldova and the Maramureș, the hills of the Eposheni, or the wilds of Harghita, the precious collections in Bucharest's museums, or the wild beauty of the Iron Gates Gorge, the castles, mountains and Saxon villages of Transylvania, or the remote valleys of Banat and Crișana. Romania has an historic legacy that stretches back to the Dacian fortresses and the Greek cities of Histria and Argamum. To find such a huge wealth of natural and cultural diversity under a single flag is quite remarkable, and is one of the features which makes Romania such a uniquely special corner of Europe. So too is the determination of the Romanian people to preserve and protect their heritage, to hold fast to their crafts and traditions, and to retain the very best of the past whilst building a brighter future. I'm so glad that Romania's many treasures are becoming known and appreciated by a growing number of people. This year, all of us have experienced a profound moment of change as our lives have been turned upside down by the first major pandemic that any of us have known. It has been a time of huge uncertainty and anxiety, not just for the safety of those closest to us, our friends and our families, but also for the future welfare and livelihoods of so many people. All around the world, countries shut their borders, and it became necessary for people to stop traveling. I do know just what a devastating effect this has had on the tourist industry, on hotels, restaurants, and other tourist businesses, and on the millions of jobs that depend on them. But staying at home can offer so many wonders to explore and to discover. As restrictions are lifted, people will want to travel again and to rediscover the world around them. Understandably, many will want to jump on an aeroplane and swap the familiar for a breath of foreign air. However, now is also the ideal time to rediscover one's roots and reconnect with one's heritage. I have every confidence that Romanians who do so will find much to delight them and to give them the greatest pride in their country. For myself, Romania holds a very special place in my heart. I can trace my forebears all the way back to Vlad Tepes, which may explain why each time I visit, there is a part of me that feels at home. For as long as I am able, I will continue to champion the importance of protecting and celebrating Romania's unique treasures, her villages, her historic buildings, her food and drink, and her precious biodiversity, her wildlife and majestic forests. There is so much to explore, and domestic tourism has such great potential to create jobs and bring prosperity to even the most remote rural areas. So I could only encourage all Romanians to rediscover the incredible riches within the borders of your remarkable country. And when it becomes possible for me to travel to Romania again, it will be a precious moment to cherish. Să ne revedem cu bine.
This showed you also some of the touristic places, but also Romania's impressive nature reserves, which I think for those of you that like to go hiking or they like to be out in nature, I can honestly say that Romania is definitely one of the best places to be. I will not refer to all Romania because we don't have enough time, but I chose 3 regions to highlight some of the most important places to visit. And I will start with the northern part of Romania, which is called Maramureș, also called the Land of Wood. You saw a little bit earlier those gates that are carved, and they're absolutely spectacular. So what can you visit in Maramureș? You can see spectacular wooden churches. They are UNESCO patrimony heritage. The Mary Cemetery, which again you heard about a little bit earlier. It's a great place to be, even though death is not something funny, definitely. But if you read the inscriptions on these plates and crosses, they are all very, very hilarious poems. The Perry Monastery, which has a tower which is 78-meter high, is said to be the tallest wooden church in the world, in the whole world. Sighet. Sighet is a town in Maramureș, and this is where you know Elie Wiesel, who got the Nobel Peace Prize, the Holocaust survivor. This is where his memorial house is, and this is also where you can find the memorial to the victims of communism, which I referred a little bit earlier. You can find nature reserves as well here. You can go on a steam train ride, which is quite nice. The train is called Mocănița, and the art and crafts are also spectacular. So again, from wood carving to stitching and sewing these blouses and the traditional costumes, to pottery and different other things. I prepared a few images as well, so we can take a look at them. We can move on to the next slide. Yes, so here on the left-hand side, upper corner, you can see the Mary Cemetery. This is how it looks. The wooden churches on the right-hand side. A very famous artist on the lower right side. His name is Daniel Leș, and he's a famous potter. And the ride on the steam train through Maramureș on the left. We'll continue with another region. So we are coming from the northern part of Romania to the central part of Romania, which is where I was born, in Transylvania, which is the land of Dracula, in fiction, definitely. And there is so much to see here. From the Saxon villages, which are in the southern part of Transylvania, these Saxon villages, they have a very, very strong German imprint. And you can see all these fortified churches. So it's very interesting to see, because they were trying to protect themselves against invaders, different tribes. They did not fortify any castles or anything. They fortified the churches, and these churches are absolutely spectacular. Sighișoara is a UNESCO citadel. It's probably the only citadel that has been inhabited throughout history constantly. Sibiu is also a very nice place to be. It was European Capital of Culture in 2007. And these are all in the same area. So if you visit the Saxon villages, you can go to Sighișoara, Sibiu, and Brașov as well. Brașov is, again, it has a very strong German imprint. So all these places, you can feel the German character there. Also the Râșnov and the Rupea fortresses, which are up on a hill, spectacular. If you go a little bit towards Bucharest, you can visit two castles, Peles Castle, where the royal families used to live, Bran Castle, which is known as Dracula's Castle, and Hunedoara Castle, which is a little bit closer to my hometown of Cluj. Near Hunedoara Castle, you can go to Sarmisegetuza Regia, which used to be the capital of Dacia. So if you think a little bit about Romania's history, Romania, as it is now, used to be Dacia before, which became a province of Rome, basically. So the Romans conquered Dacia. The Dacian people inhabited present-day Romania, and this is how Sarmisegetuza Regia is a sort of a Stonehenge, but at a very small dimension, let's say. Cluj, my hometown, which is the unofficial capital of Transylvania and the second city in Romania after the capital of Bucharest. It's really nice to visit as well. And the surroundings, one highlight here would be the Turda salt mine, underground salt mines, really spectacular. Oradea, which is a city which is close to the border with the west. So from Cluj, you have about 2 hours drive. And it's very well known for its Art Nouveau buildings. The Transalpina and the Transfăgărășan, which are spectacular roads through the mountains. Transalpina is the highest road in Romania at 2,000 meters. So quite spectacular. Let's see some images. So you can see one of the fortified churches in the Saxon villages here in the upper corner, a Saxon village on the right-hand side, and down you can see Sighișoara, the medieval citadel, which is inhabited, and Sibiu on the right-hand side. On the next slide, we have Bran Castle in the upper left corner, which is Dracula's castle. Next to it is Peles Castle, which is where the royal families lived. Under, you have Hunedoara Castle, where Vlad the Impaler, the so-called Dracula, used to hide. And the Transalpina, which is the highest road in Romania, in the lower left corner. We can continue with the next one. Sarmisegetuza, former capital of Dacia, one of the citadels up on the hill, Râșnov, the salt mine I mentioned, and my hometown of Cluj next to it in the lower part of the slide. And we'll quickly move on to the last region, which I would like to highlight, Moldavia and Bukovina, which is on the eastern side of Romania. It's considered to be very religious, and this is the place, if you say Moldavia or Bukovina, the first thing that comes to mind is the painted monasteries, which are again in the UNESCO World Heritage, and they're absolutely spectacular. Some of these most famous ones, I wrote their names there. Voronezh is probably the most famous one, and it is said that the blue color used in painting this monastery can never be replicated. Putna Monastery, which is a fortified monastery, and a hermit's cave. His name was Daniil. Also, lots of nature reserves and splendid villages, very traditional. Vatra Dornei, which is a famous spa and ski resort. Talking about crafts, you can go to Suceava, which is sort of the unofficial capital of Moldavia, and here you even have an egg museum where you can see these beautiful hand-painted eggs, and you can also find different other crafts. And Iași, which is another great city, it used to be Romania's historical capital between 1859 and 1862, together with Bucharest, because at that time Transylvania was not yet part of Romania. It was still part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So only Moldavia and the southern part of Romania were together. We can see a few images from here. So this is Voronezh with the splendid blue, which I mentioned, the Hermit's Cave, some gorges, and the ski resort, which I mentioned in the lower corner. We'll continue with the next one quickly. The Danube Delta and the Black Sea. So as you travel to the southern part of Romania, and this is one of the highlights of a tourist's life in Romania, that's the Danube Delta, which is a biosphere reserve, and it's the third largest biodiversity in the world after the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and the Galapagos Islands. So it's absolutely spectacular. And then if you go to the Romanian Black Sea, you can find lots of beaches, you can find the most popular resorts like Mamaia. Mamaia is a cutting-edge luxury resort. Vama Veche is a place for the bohemians, for the hippies. Costinești is for the younger people, and Constanța is a port city. So something for every taste. But you can also have the option of more secluded beaches like Gura Portiței, which you will see an image of it. Gura Portiței is very nicely positioned between the Black Sea and the Danube Delta. So you can find, depending on where you are on that stretch of land and on that beach, you can be either next to the lake leading to the delta or the sea. So let's see a few images here as well. See the images above, they are both from the Danube Delta. The one here with the building, this is Constanța, the port, and this is the old casino in Constanța. And the image on the right is Gura Portiței, that secluded beach I mentioned, which is between the lake taking us to the Danube Delta and the Black Sea. And we can move on. So if you want to know more, we'll actually stop here. You can do two things. You can either decide to walk if you like hiking. You can walk Romania's Camino. Probably you heard about Camino de Santiago, the famous Camino de Santiago. There is a group in Romania, an organization that is currently working on developing something similar. It's called Via Transilvanica. It crosses Romania. You see this map, and it's about 1,400 kilometers. Of course, you can walk for, I don't know, portions of it, or I strongly recommend that you watch some documentaries. Probably the most famous ones in which Prince Charles will also appear is The Wild Carpathia, which was produced in the United Kingdom and broadcasted on the Travel Channel, but also Untamed Romania if you're more interested into nature and wildlife, and Flavors of Romania if you're into gastronomy. So something for every taste. Thank you very much for your attention. If you want to reach me, I am running two groups in London, London Live Music and Theatre and London City Trotters. You can also find me on Instagram. And this image here with me is an image in the Apuseni Mountains, which is a nature reserve near my hometown of Cluj. So it's absolutely spectacular. Too bad the rocks are very high. You can't really see everything. So I'm open for questions now. If anybody